test. Can you hear it reverberating there?
Test 1, 2. Test.
Yeah. So
Are staff mics working? Mics working?
Check. Superfluous. Okay.
Are we on? Yes. Okay, test.
Test 1, 2, 3. Test. Someone online to talk to verify.
Mics are hot.
We can hear Navarro.
Can you hear me? We can't hear you. Oh, it's because we muted this TV. I think. Okay, we have one last thing to fix and then we'll get started. Thank you all for your patience. For anyone who's online, we were having technical difficulties where people couldn't hear us through WebEx. So I think we've got that taken care of. We have one more step and then we will call the meeting to order. After I spill my.
Navarra, can you hear us okay? And can you try saying something again, please?
Yes, I can hear you great. Can you hear me?
Just barely, so we'll have to adjust that a little bit.
Okay.
Good enough for Navarra? With Navarra, yeah.
Deputy Mayor Carr, can we do one more sound check?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you all for your patience. Just when we were getting ready to go, I spilled my water. So I think everything that could happen, but never mind, I'm not going to say it. Welcome to the regular council meeting of the Port Angeles City Council. This is the first meeting of November, Wednesday, November 6th. Can we do a roll call, please?
Mayor Dexter,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Carr,
Here.
Councilmember Meyer,
Present.
Councilmember Miller,
Here.
Councilmember Showman Warren, Councilmember Schwab,
Here.
Councilmember Suggs,
Here.
Manager West,
Present.
Attorney Bloor.
Needs to be here.
Thank you.
Does anyone want to make a motion to excuse Councilmember Showman Warren?
I'll make a motion to excuse Councilmember Schroman Warren from November 6th meeting.
Second.
Anyone opposed to the motion to approve Lindsay? Please state your opposition. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Sorry, I should have done that first. All right, if you can please rise as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Our guest who is going to receive the Veterans Day proclamation is not here this evening, so we're going to postpone and do that at the next meeting. And before we get to public comment, I want to mention also that I would like to propose that we postpone the discussion of the 2025 legislative priorities until the next meeting. Is there a consensus on that? I'm seeing head nods and thumbs up. Okay, excellent. So item I1 on tonight's agenda will be moved to the November, I think it's the 19th meeting. Thank you. That brings us to public comment. I know there's probably two. Anyone else? We don't have anyone signed up. If you are online and wish to speak at public comment this evening, please raise your virtual hand. And just a reminder, the first public comment period is limited to items on this evening's agenda. So John, go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, John Ralston. I'm going to comment on the business license.
We have a public hearing on that, so you'll want to wait 2 minutes and speak in the public hearing.
Excuse me, that is a public hearing?
It is a public hearing.
Okay, great.
Right.
And I'll talk about
Yes.
I-2, city-owned property. I think it's great you're looking at some of these things. I didn't see in the list of items in your full packet of any raw land or vacant land of any kind included. Maybe that's coming up down the road, but I certainly hope that that shows up on the list at some point in time. And I'm encouraged by and certainly hope that the city will look at disposing of some of their properties or getting market rate for rent on those properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So because of the time, we do have 2 public hearings this evening. And what I'd like to do is go first to the agenda splits in a place that keeps messing with my eyes. We're going to go to item F2 first. That is the general business license. We have a couple of guests, one online, and then I think folks in the audience who are here to speak to that. And in the interest of making sure they get out of here at a reasonable hour, we'll start with that one. So I'm going to turn it over to Calvin.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight's public hearing is on implementing a general business license by amending Title V of the Port Angeles Municipal Code and revising the city's master fee schedule. The PowerPoint that you see now was sent to you earlier today, as well as hard copies are also available at the council dais and for members of the public. This presentation is about 12 minutes long, so if possible, if you please consider holding your questions until the end. Likely early questions will be answered on a later slide. Additionally, you'll find a detailed staff memo starting on page F5 of your packet that details this issue. Next slide. Thank you, Carrie. Moving to slide 2 in your packet tonight, the staff presentation will cover 8 quick items. First, we'll do a quick set of introductions. Second, a brief recap of the issues and background. Third, we will summarize council direction from your September 17th work session. Fourth, we'll cover the proposed amendments to Title V. Fifth, next we'll highlight the revisions to the master fee schedule. Sixth, we'll review proposed investments. Seventh, we'll cover next steps and the staff recommendations. And then eighth, end with your council questions and directions. For quick introductions, in addition to our city team here, it's from CED, the clerk's office, finance, and legal. We're also pleased to be joined tonight by Anne Marie Soto from Madrona Law and Jennifer Walker from the Department of Revenue. Next slide. All right, so let's start with a quick recap of this topic. As you'll recall, the council has been weighing in on this issue, engaged on this issue. I think this is the 3rd time so far. This slide that you see should look familiar. It's part of the list of 16 issues that council worked on with Madrona Law as part of the code reinventing, re-envisioning work and code audit project. Again, this item has been a council priority for some time. Specifically, this is from your work session of September 27th of 2022. Next slide. This also should look familiar. This is from April 25th, 2023, a presentation where, again, the council reiterated its intention to look holistically at the costs for city services. Next slide. Another slide from the memory box, this one from October 3rd of 2023. Again, the council made a decision to engage with the FCS group to do a fact-based cost analysis of all city services. Next slide. The work of FCS led council to adjust and adopt a new fee structure on October 23rd of 2023. This new approach established a minimum cost for city services. Next slide. That minimum floor for city services and city costs adopted by the council was $95.10. Next slide. As council will also recall, the Department of Revenue's Business Licensing Services Program is a one-stop shop for business licensing. Next slide. Today, nearly 220 jurisdictions across the state are participating in this program, including our neighbors in Sequim and Port Townsend. Next slide. Of the 281 cities and towns in Washington, only 50 do not currently collect a general business license, and Port Angeles is the last remaining city in the state of our size not to have a general business license. Next slide. As you're aware, Port Angeles currently has 15 specialty licenses ranging from fees at $25 for horse taxis, $50 for for hire vehicles, and $100 for adult entertainment. Next slide. And Port Angeles has one regulatory business fee for short-term lodging licenses. These fees range from $192 to $475 a year, depending on the STL type. Next slide. So during the September 17th work session on business licenses, we heard the following from a majority of council. Number one, is updating Chapter 5 business licenses still a priority of the council? Yes. Number two, does council wish to replace the current 15 specialty licenses administered by the clerk with a general citywide business license? Yes. Number three, if yes, should a general citywide business license remain separate from the existing short-term lodging license? Yes. If yes, should the general citywide business license be a flat fee for all or a graduated progressive fee? Graduated progressive fee. Next slide. Number five, if a graduated progressive fee, should the general citywide business license be based on annual revenues or the number of employees? Gross revenue. Number six, should nonprofit organizations only pay a nominal fee in order to maintain a list of those organizations operating within city limits? Yes, at the lowest rate possible. And number seven, with new license fee revenues, does council have policy areas to suggest for investment? Downtown resource officer, code enforcement, CFP priorities, small business support, homelessness support, and affordable housing. Again, that was from the majority of council at your September 17th work session. Next slide. Council also asked staff to proactively reach out and meet with key business organizations on this topic. Staff met with the leadership of the following organizations: the Port Angeles Association of Realtors on 9/27, the Olympic Peninsula Lodging Alliance on 10/2, the Port Angeles Chamber of Commerce leadership on 10/3, the leadership of the Waterfront District Elevate Port Angeles organization also on the 3rd, the North Peninsula Builders Association on 10/8, the Economic Development Council on 10/9, and the leadership of PABA on 10/21. I'd also notice that staff held follow-up meetings with both the EDC and PABA leadership on this topic. Next slide. From those conversations, staff received the following generalized feedback. First, the license amount should be flat and as low as possible. And I believe council, you received correspondence from the EDC as well as PABA along those lines. Administrative requirements should be minimal. Confidential business information should be left with DOR BLS, and new revenue, if generated, should be focused on the needs of the business community. Next slide. Now let's move to the proposed changes. Based on the consensus received from council during the September 17th, 2024 work session, city staff from legal, finance, the city clerk's office, and CED worked closely with Madrona Law and DOR BLS to propose updates to Title V and the master fee schedule necessary to implement a new general business license in Port Angeles. Next slide. So starting with the proposed changes to Title V. Again, to quickly recap council direction on this topic, council said yes to replacing the current 15 specialty licenses and yes to a separate license from the existing short-term licenses, short-term lodging licenses. Next slide. So Section 5.04, general provisions, was updated for clarity and consistency to match this direction. These requirements were our city's previous business license requirements. We have updated, removed, and the unnecessary language that was redundant. This updates the city's overarching goals and role around business licensing. 504 clarifies definitions and various city processes. And we've also reserved the term regulatory permits for future uses, i.e. food trucks, which I know is an important priority of the council. And I will note that that legislation is now working its way through the Planning Commission. 504 was drafted in coordination with Madrona and reviewed by DOR BLS. And if needed, further streamlining can be reviewed following tonight's public hearing. Next page. Section 5.06, General Business License. This is a completely new section that was added to meet the DOR BLS best practices. This really defines DOR's roles and process. And this section is based on AWC and MRSC model ordinances. It is boilerplate language, and nearly 220 cities and towns in the state are using a very similar approach. Again, this was drafted in coordination with Madrona and reviewed by DOR BLS. Next slide. Per council's direction on September 17th, the following would be repealed: 5.08, 5.16, 5.20, 5.24, 5.36, 5.37. Next slide. Also would be repealed 5.40, 5.44, 5.50, 5.52, 5.56, 5.58, next slide, as well as repealing 5.64, 5.70, 5.90, and 5.95. And again, per council's direction, no changes to short-term lodging, 1723 or 1724 rules, regulations, regulatory licenses, or fees are being proposed. Next slide. One of the issues raised by the business community during the recent outreach meetings was data security and confidentiality. We appreciate the business leaders flagging this issue and have worked very hard to ensure that applications and business data are submitted to and held by DOR under this proposal. No forms or data will be physically in the possession of the city. Only select city staff that have signed a confidentiality agreement with DOR can view applications through a secure DOR portal. A strict firewall between DOR and the city will be in place. Additionally, Title 82 RCW and the state's Public Records Acts provide express exemptions from disclosure of tax information. Next slide. So now let's move to the proposed revisions to the master fee schedule. Under state law, there are three types of business licenses that can be implemented. The first is a business license in which the city may only recover the administrative costs associated with issuing the license. The second license type is less restrictive and would allow the city to collect fees that are supportive of broader city services that also support the business community, such as police and fire services. The third type is a regulatory license for businesses that require additional regulation and oversight, such as the city's regulation of short-term lodging. Next slide. Again, to recap the council direction on this item, the majority of council supported a graduated progressive fee based on gross revenue, and that nonprofits would only pay the lowest rate possible. Next slide. Staff have provided two options for council's consideration. The first option would allow the city only to charge an amount necessary to recover administrative costs associated with issuing a license. The second option would collect a larger amount and to support broader city services and needs. In alignment with your direction on September 17th, staff is recommending approval of the option shown in gray. So based on an annual business gross revenue in Port Angeles between $0 and $5,000 or nonprofit organizations, the fee would be $0. For those with $5,001 to $100,000 in annual gross business revenue from Port Angeles, $95.10. From $101,000 to $1 million, $190.20, and over $1 million, $280.30. This also incentivizes micro small businesses, and I would note that businesses with multiple locations in Port Angeles would only pay one fee at once. It is estimated that this option in gray would generate approximately $150,000 to $200,000 a year. Next slide. The next item covers recommendations for community investments. Again, council's direction on this item as follows, with public safety being the leading response. Next slide. City staff have detailed critical community investments that directly align with the work session consensus and your recently adopted council strategic plan and key citywide goals. Next slide. Specifically, these investments would support community resilience by increasing community engagement, outreach with the public and local businesses, improving public safety and peace of mind in our community, and improving community health and wellness. Additionally, citywide resource optimization would be supported by growing staff capacity to address chronic issues impacting the community, such as homelessness. And again, these come directly from your strategic plan document. Next slide. Staff have approached these proposed community investments in a very cautious and conservative budgeting approach. If approved by council, the new business license will at least support phase one, which would consist of dedicated and stable funding support for the downtown resource officer position and converting the half-time code enforcement officers into a single full-time position. We would proceed with phase two if funding levels support additional investments. These would be considered at a later date. Next slide. Finally, next steps. If adopted, revenue collected from the general business license would be addressed as an amendment to the 2025 budget. Based on DOR BLS workload, a new business license in Port Angeles will not be implemented until Q2 or Q3 of 2025. New business license requirements would not commence until that time. And city staff will work closely with DOR BLS and the business community to ensure transparent and frequent outreach to the business community on these key milestones and next steps. Next slide. So council, to recap this topic, the council identified business licensing as a priority. The city has been studying this issue for years. Council also identified new revenue sources to offset the costs of services. Additionally, council approved the FCS COSA base rate for city services of $95.10. $0.10. Current city license rates vary from $25 to $50 to $100 to $450 a year. The staff recommended license fee amounts in this proposal fit well within that range. Additionally, key investments being recommended directly align with your adopted strategic plan. And finally, there will be a solid business data firewall with DOR BLS. Next slide. So council, tonight's recommendation is 1, to open the public hearing, 2, close the public hearing, 3, conduct the first reading of the ordinance, 4, provide direction on the proposed fee rate in the draft phase 1 staffing plan, and 5, continue the matter to the November 19th council meeting. Next slide. And with that, we're happy to answer your questions and receive your direction.
All right, as is typical, I'm sure council has questions, but we're gonna go to the public hearing. So I will open the public hearing. If you are, I'm not gonna use the gavel. The public hearing is open. If you are in council chambers to speak to us about this issue, we'll do council chambers first, and then we have one hand online. And same rules as public comment. Name whether or not you're a resident, and in council chambers, the lectern will keep track of your time, and for Jim online, I will keep time for that one. Go ahead when you're ready, John.
Yeah, hi, John Ralston, City of Port Angeles resident. Earlier, and I just took some notes while Calvin was giving a very nice presentation. I was also going to ask, because the meeting started 30 minutes late tonight, does that mean that 30 minutes will automatically be added to the end? Not necessarily. Okay. I was going to make some comments. I think Calvin, if I heard him correctly, anticipated that these fees will bring in somewhere between 100 to 150K a year. Anyway, Calvin, before the meeting started, because I asked this question, maybe 2 months ago, and he indicated to me that Port Townsend is gathering $136,000 a year. And if they're at a flat fee of $78 per year, that indicates that there's about 1,700 businesses in Port Townsend. Squim at $90,000 a year, at $56 per entity, that's about $1,600, 1,600 businesses. I don't know if Port Angeles has more businesses than Squim or Port Townsend, but I would assume that they do. Or maybe the other communities have a stronger commitment for people enrolling in the program as another variable. But my concern is at this maybe roughly $200 an entity. I don't know, I didn't do the quick math to try to get to the 100K or 150K. But my concern is with what seems to be in the proposal about adding these different programs in the budget, you're spending the money, in my opinion, with a credit card, because you don't have a track record of any revenue coming in yet. So I would not spend or budget any money until you have revenue that's actually happening. It's going to take if people are going to enroll in the program, it's going to take a while for that to happen. But yet you're going to potentially be spending funds. I'd be cautious of that. And generally, I will also say I'm not in favor of the business license. I don't know how it's going to benefit the city other than you're looking at it a revenue source. And I don't think that the revenue source is really going to be that strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, go ahead.
Good evening, Mark Abshire. I'm a resident of Port Angeles, also the director of the Port Angeles Chamber of Commerce and a member of the EDC Board of Directors. And just for information, I was one of the authors of the letter that you got from the EDC tonight. So I've already given some input, but I want to take this opportunity to commend the council and Calvin on doing a really fantastic job of reaching out to the business community on this topic that affects the business community quite directly. And it was conducted in a very open and thorough way. So appreciate that very much. And I want to just underscore the chamber's position on this, and that is reflected in the EDC letter as well, which is we don't really, first of all, we understand the need for business licenses in the city, so that's not really an issue. Also appreciate the lowest level possible as the target, especially because there's a lot of businesses we want to help get started here. So, and we don't want barriers to businesses starting, right? So, but tying the license to a variable factor like gross revenue is inherently inequitable. And we think long-term, it's probably not the right way to go. And so that's one of the reasons why we're recommending the flat rate. Gross revenue is, an indiscriminate value of depending on your type of business. As an example, restaurateurs taking a lot of money, but their expenses are also, their overhead is extremely high. So the margins are very thin. In business with a very thin margin, the revenue amount, the gross revenue amount is not really indicative of how well a business is doing. So that's just one example. There's a lot of others. I also think number of employees doesn't really reflect an equitable factor either. So we just feel that, flat rate is the best way to go. And that's our recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Jim, we'll go to you online. Let me get my timer up. And we'll make sure, so if we can unmute Jim McIntyre. And Jim, once I know we can hear you, I will start your timer. Are you there, Jim? I mean, I know you're there. I just don't know if you can hear. We can't hear you. Give it another minute. It shows that you're using maybe a headset. It's hard to tell. If that's the case, perhaps is the, oh, okay, remuted. Can we try one more time and see if it makes a difference?
Okay, how does that?
Yes,
how does
now I
that
can hear
work?
you.
Okay, good.
It's working
Yeah.
well. Okay, go ahead, Jim.
The button, thank you very much. Jim McIntyre, live in the county north of Sequim here on behalf of the Port Angeles Business Association this evening. It's nice to visit with you again. It's been some while since I had a chat with you. Let me echo and associate myself with the comments just previous from Mark Abshire. I won't either go over in detail the comments, the testimony from the Business Association that you should have received earlier this afternoon. Let me just ask while I'm at it that you make those written comments a part of your hearing record. Let me just make a little bit higher level point to kind of reinforce what Mark was just talking about as far as the impact on the business community. There's no question that the law gives the city the authority to first of all install a requirement for a business permit, and second of all to establish whatever fee structure seems best to you. Let me just observe that the business environment in the city is awfully important because it's in the public interest, it's in the city government's interest to have a flourishing business community here. The more businesses are able to flourish, grow, make sales, provide services, so on and so forth, the more that throws off sales tax revenue, which is one of the mainstays of the city's finances. So we should try to look at this with the idea of making the business opportunities and making the business community make it as easy as possible for the businesses that are here right now to flourish, more businesses to be established, so on and so forth. Second, we really do appreciate the care that the city staff has taken to protect proprietary and confidential business association. We make the point in our testimony that there's still some patch-up work that needs to be done with the short-term rental ordinance and the B&B ordinance. In that regard, we've provided a suggestion to city staff as to how to get that information in the aggregate from the platform licensees instead of the individual B&B and STR licensees. So we would ask that you consider to fix that problem in those two regulatory permits. And second of all, or third of all, just to make the point that in this post-COVID environment, economic environment, every additional cost hurts as far as businesses go. Mark made the comment about restaurants in particular and thin margins. That's true of other
Jim,
businesses also.
Your time is up. So if you can wrap up your thought, sorry.
That's pretty much it. Mayor Dexter, thank you again for letting me talk. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
You bet.
All right. Anyone else wish to speak to this issue? Sorry, I couldn't hit the, apparently I wasn't able to stop my timer properly. All right. I don't see anyone else who wishes to speak, and there are no more hands online. So I will close the public hearing and we can go to council questions. Are there any questions from council? Drew, go ahead.
My first question was a clarifying question for staff. You mentioned that if you had multiple locations, you would not necessarily need another business license in the city of PA. The part that I wanted clarification on is would the city business licenses be tied to our UBI, our state business license number? In which case, it's possible that I could have 3 businesses at my one location, or I could also have one business with 3 locations, depending upon how I have it set up.
Thank you, council member. The intent would be you would not need 3 business licenses at your single location, depending on the structure. We've got DOR online. I'm not sure if Jennifer is able to answer that question about being tied to the UBI and how that would relate. If not, we can follow up separately.
Okay. And then just a quick observation that I was pounding away at. So if you have to take all of this information.
Drew, do you want to pause for just a minute? Because Jennifer just unmuted, so you might be able to answer your first question. Jennifer, go ahead. Thanks for being here.
Yes, no problem. Thank you for having me. So to answer your question, it really is, like Calvin said, the city's decision what they would like to do. So if a business has multiple activities in one location, it would be tied to the same UBI. The city can also choose that if a business has 3 physical businesses within city limits, each of them can be their own, essentially a business. They would be tied to the same UBI, but with different accounts. So it really is the city's decision which direction they would want to go with that.
Okay, thank you. The only other thing I wanted to mention right this second was I did some real fast napkin numbers on the DOR website. The city of Port Angeles has 6,709 businesses that have addresses in Port Angeles. Take that with a grain of salt because a lot of those, well, those should all be active, but that doesn't necessarily mean they make a lot of money. And also the residence address is Port Angeles. It doesn't mean their operational location is Port Angeles. And the reason why I point that out is because SQUIM, which I think we heard was about 1,300, has 5,431 businesses listed for SQUIM. So the best use of that number is, yes, we have more businesses in SQUIM than SQUIM. So we would have, theoretically, if everyone registers correctly, then we would see a higher number than we would in SQUIM.
Let's go, Latricia, Amy, Brendan. Go ahead.
For us non-business people, what does UBI stand for? Sorry.
Universal or unified, I always forget, business identification. It's basically our tax ID number for the state.
Great, thank you.
Amy, go ahead.
That was quick. Thank you. I have a couple of things I wanted to say. First, I appreciate having Madrona and DOR here and in attendance and available. Thank you for inviting them and thank you guys for being here. Also hearing the thank yous from the business community to our staff is pretty impressive and just wanted to call that out. Thank you for doing that. I think, so I appreciate what is here. I am ready to support it as is and prepared to waive the second reading. But I also wanted to ask, we talked about having nonprofits not have to pay a fee, but so that we could have a list of that. And I know we were also talking about privacy issues, but I guess what I'm asking is at some location, we would have a list of businesses that are doing business in Port Angeles. Would we be able to use that in our like dissemination of information, like when we have water conservation episodes to share or other things that are like citywide things?
Thank you, council member. Yes, the nonprofit businesses would need they are registered and would pay no fee to the city because that was one of the priorities that council had, is to have a sense of what's out there. Yes, we would have access to lists of how many businesses and broad types, but our confidentiality agreement with DR would prohibit us from sharing, business X generates A, B, or C amount of revenue. But yes, I think one of the council's priorities for doing this is have a sense. Is it 5,600? Is it 2,600? What is the actual amount of businesses operating within the city limits?
Okay, thank you. And one more question that you might have been prepared for. So on the other option here where it's a flat fee, how would that change the suggestions for investment from the staff's perspective?
Thank you, council member. So the two options that were on slide in your packet, would the gray option, as I mentioned earlier, we conservatively estimate that it would be $150,000 to $200,000. If the council went with the flat rate, that would probably generate about half as much. And so we would need council in phase one, which is the supported and dedicated funding for the downtown resource officer and the conversion of the 2 vacant part-time code enforcement officers to a full-time. That would be funded into the gray option. If council was to go with the flat option, we would need your feedback of which of the 2 you would like to proceed with, because we don't believe there's enough revenue under that option for both of them.
Thank you.
Brendan.
There's this adage that's, if all your friends are jumping off the Empire State Building, are you going to jump off the Empire State Building too? And, the answer to that is no, of course. But like just seeing that slide where it's like, well, every other city is doing this. So of course we should be taking advantage of this as well. But there's a lot of cities that aren't. And yes, they have less population, but, this idea of, just because we can do something, that we should do something, isn't really something that like I abide by. I haven't been in favor of this. This discussion has been going on for many years so far. This is a culmination of it now. So I probably will not be supporting it anyway, but in an effort to try to find some kind of way that I could support it, there are things that I would like to see changed. I would like to see the $0 to $5,000 gross revenue suggestion moved from $0 to $25,000, and then on below that $25,000 to $100,000. And all that could stay the same. The annual, I'm more in favor, I think, of the flat rate instead of the adjusted rate. And I would also like to see maybe $0 to like $10,000 not even require the licensing at all. The reason why I would like to see these changes is because I think, like, I like referring back to, like, just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean that we have to. If somebody is, you know, making ends meet with, you know, knitting sweaters or something and selling them to people, and they're only making about $8,000 a year, you know, that $100, $95.10 actually means more to that person. So those are some of the changes I would like to see. And I think that could get, if we could see those changes, I think that could get me on board with this. But now just a question for staff, would I have to make those amendments currently?
Thank you, Councilmember. So I just want to make sure I'm tracking. So if you're on page F30 of the packet, the Exhibit B, the master fee schedule. So in the gray option, you would adjust the current top line, which is $0 to $5,000, to instead be $0 to $25,000. And the second line you would adjust, which is currently 5,001 to 100,000, to be 25,000 to 100,000. And then I don't know where we put it on here, but then another item that would say $0 to $10,000, no license at all. Probably.
And then the second one would be $45,000.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. So I would defer to currently this is anticipated or could be continued to your next council meeting. If there's majority support through a motion for that amendment, that's the version we would bring back to you. Or if there's interest in moving with final reading and final action tonight, you know, I think we've captured that if, again, that was supported by the majority of the council. The one thing, if I could offer, council member, is having worked with DOR and gone through the process, going from not having a license at all, you know, these businesses, a $9,000 business should already be registered with the Department of Revenue and have a SAW account. It's only about 45 seconds more to print that business license. It's about 2 more tabs. So just something for.
I get that. It's not the dollar. So you're already paying, you know, for the initial state business license, $200 and something. So an extra $100 just the city, so because the city can collect it, isn't necessary. So like I said, that person that's bringing in $9,000, that $195 or whatever is considerably more than, you know, $1 million business paying the same costs. So, and I understand perhaps maybe that is the sort of reason why we're doing it, is because we can collect more money for people who have less money to generate more revenue for the city. I understand that's the concept of why we're doing this. Don't necessarily agree with it, but I could get on board if we made these type of changes. And if I have to make a motion for those changes, I will certainly do that. Should I make a motion for those? Just.
Well, there's no motion right now, so you would make a main motion with the changes, but so you can do that if you want, but I want to get some clarification from what you just said based on what I heard Calvin say. You're saying that you want to increase the dollar amount for no fee, but then you said the $100 for someone who's not making very much. But if your example is the $8,000 sweater maker, they would pay $0 and have to click 2 more tabs for 45 seconds more to get the business license, but it wouldn't cost them anything. So I'm just, I guess, challenging a little bit or getting clarification on your point that they shouldn't need one at all. But if it doesn't cost them anything, it's just an extra like couple steps, right? Because what you're saying is both of these propose that currently $0 to $5,000 would pay no fee, and nonprofit organizations. They have to get the license, but they don't have to pay a fee. So I just wanted to make sure we were on the same, that I was understanding you. And
for the one that I proposed, the $0 to $10,000, 0 fee, $0 to $10,000 wouldn't. Okay, so you just say just make them go ahead and sign, click the extra 2 tabs.
But it wouldn't cost them anything. If that's your,
okay.
I'm just trying to clarify if that's your actual concern, is the cost It sounds like that was your concern, so I wanted to
I mean,
seek
it's,
clarification on
I
you.
mean, it's twofold. I mean, it's the cost and it's also, I'm like a smaller government type of guy. So I don't think they need to know everything about everybody, what's your favorite cereal and stuff like that. So, yeah, so it's twofold. It's both the, costs benefit to the person, I guess, and then also just the spooky Orwellian sort of vibes.
All right, thank you for the clarification. Navarra, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, first, I'm sorry, but I think it's deeply upsetting to hear that for those of us on council who for the past 2 years have been working on the same direction on this, to be categorized as trying to put something forward that is Orwellian is frankly insulting. So like we're colleagues here, Brendan. That's truly insulting to me and probably our staff as well. What a ridiculous assertion. This isn't Orwellian. It's not just to try to make money. It's to recognize the fact that for a long time, only some businesses have had to pay for their fair share of services that we are providing. We are now providing, as a city, dedicated resources to businesses in our community. And they have tried, the business community wanted some of those services and chipped in the funds to help make them be a reality. And now we're saying, hey, everybody is going to be able to pay their fair share to make those programs a reality for everybody in our community. The Downtown Resource Officer, which could be expanded to other businesses as well, should be paid for by our business community who is benefiting directly from that service, right? We just talked about having code enforcement be another full-time job so that we can have it filled. That fulfills those positions, directly serve our business community, as do the other ones that are being presented here. And to categorize this, I think very reasonable, obviously, from the slide presentation, not looking at what other cities have done isn't to say we're jumping off the Empire State Building, Brendan. It's to say that we are doing something that is in our city's best interest for our community, for our residents, for the city of Port Angeles as a whole. And to look and say, you know what, when we are the only outlier, maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe it's because we've been behind the times for decades, and that is why we're in the situation that we are now. So anyhow, I am supporting the gray option of having a graduated tier. And part of that is because I think the term equitable was talked about a lot tonight, but I think it was misused. So when we're talking about equity, I think what we're actually talking about is people being able to pay their fair share. And to Brendan's point, which I think is a good one, businesses that are making $5,000 a year are not the same as a business that's making $1 million a year. And the business that's making $1 million should be paying what is an equitable fee for them, which is going to be more for what they're doing than a business that is just starting out or has a very low profit margin, right? And so I think that if our community cares about equity and if we are thinking about what equity means, it is having people pay more if they can pay more. And the businesses that are making substantial profits, I think really can pay more than our businesses that are making substantially less. I, of course, will support the other option, the flat rate option, because I think that anything is better than what we have now. And I'm extremely grateful to have this finally in front of us today after the 2 years we've been spending working on it through the staff dedication and our friends at Madrona. But I would encourage us to think strategically about actually thinking about equity and having an equitable program. I think both for our business community and our residents and our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Navarra. I'll go.
Can I just get
quickly.
some clarification? Do I still need to make the amendment if I want to see those changes?
So what you would do, I'm going to speak first and then go back. I'm going to take my turn. And then if you want to go again, I can call on you next. I think at this point, because there is no motion, there are two things. One, if you want to make a motion, it needs to include waive the second reading. Because we've closed the public hearing, that's already done, but we do have this on, the way it's proposed currently is to carry it forward to the next meeting for a vote and just seek clarification from council tonight to direct staff for what to bring back for us to consider. That said, we can adopt it tonight because there's the ordinance and the fee schedule is resolution. So that's great. We could do that. So you would just make your motion the way you want it to be. That's what you would do. If that's what you want to do, but I'm going to go real quickly. So I do appreciate also staff bringing this forward. I really appreciate, I know I was I was someone who said, let's make sure that everybody knows that we're talking about this in the business community. So thank you for doing that. And thank you to the business community for reaching out. I think one of the things that gets tricky, which I think is what the business community has pointed out that I've been wrestling with today. You know, I can look at this and think, well, if I'm a business, is $280 a lot? It doesn't seem like it, but I'm also not a business and I don't know what my margins are and what my bottom line is. And I think where it gets tricky, and to Navarra's point, is gross revenue is not net profit. And so I think I'm not going to suggest that we completely change it all. But I think that's the part that I'm still struggling with a little bit is I know if we don't charge the graduated amount, we can't do both suggestions. And I also think there is some inherent inequity in having a flat rate because regardless of your profit margins, we're looking at gross revenue anyway. I don't think profit margin is an easy way to do it, which is why we're doing gross revenue. And I suspect because of the way that this was all prepared, that's exactly what the state does as well. So we certainly wouldn't be out of line by doing that. And so I'm still a little bit undecided on flat rate or graduated. The other thing that I think is important to me is that we're doing this process in part so that we can fiddle with things as we go. So we could try implementation, see how it works. Oh, we need to change it a little bit. That's the whole goal of this, is that it's easier to do that. And so either way, I think we're not locking ourselves into something for the next 25 years. We can be nimble as we move forward. But we do need to have some direction, and I'm assuming that Brendan is going to make a motion when I call on him next. You have a question?
Question then or thoughts?
Okay, I'm going to call on Brendan and then we'll go to you next. Okay, fine.
I would recommend Brandon waits a second because I want to support a lot of what you're saying, but not all of what you're saying. So first off, a couple of thoughts and then also a couple of questions that might be more directed towards DOR. I know I could dig around and pull up some of this information, but it might just be faster to ask. I know there's like 30 different rates. Roughly, when does the small business tax credit for B&O top out at?
I am not familiar with tax, and so I would have to get back to you on that and make sure I get you that information. So I apologize.
I could find it if I dig around a little bit. I just didn't know if by some weird chance that was one of those.
I don't.
You know.
I don't know anything with tax, just licensing.
Okay. So for those on council who do not operate businesses, we all pay B&O, business and I always get the acronyms mixed up, occupation.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Tax. Basically, it's a tax. So congratulations, you have a business. Give me money. That's fine. There is a small business tax credit that basically negates that tax to a certain percent, up to a certain amount of money. It differs between the different industries, I believe retail, and I'm pulling information from the top of my head from a very long time ago, about $100,000-ish. You don't start paying B&O or your full B&O until you do about $100,000. gross. I don't know how crazy any of these equations would end up being if we tie the graduated when you don't have to pay versus when you do have to pay for business license to your B&O taxes. It would effectively take care of part of that already. That might be way more complicated in so many different directions that the business community will hate that idea, and I accept that. I just thought it would be an interesting point to bring that one up. As far as net versus gross versus number of employees, I want to make sure I take a moment to restate my thought process on that because I support basing it off of gross. The reasons for that is your number of employees are meaningless. I mean, if you're running an LLC, you could be self-employed. You could also have 30 employees. It doesn't really make a big difference. The problem with running net is because I don't like paying income taxes. So guess what? My goal is to make my net income as low as possible and only enough to actually pay for what I need. So I can actually get my net down fairly low when it's all said and done because of deductibles, expenses, things like that. If I throw more money at marketing, which does put money to the chamber and other things, but I can get some of my expenses higher so that way I end up paying less tax. So gross, for better or for worse, in my opinion, is about the closest you're going to be able to get from a general idea. Yes, I recognize a lot of businesses run on very thin margins. I don't even want to guess what the hospital runs at. And having been in the restaurant industry, I know the restaurant industry margins are trash, which is why I'm not in the restaurant industry. I'll stick with retail. But of our choices, I feel that gross would be the closest to an equitable, assuming I'm using it correctly, closest to an equitable way of figuring out, I guess, who can afford things. My other thought, and I'm going to throw this one out here, and it's not in the direction that several people want me to go, and I know that. I have no issues with the idea of 0 to 25,000 not having to pay a fee. If it's only because of a reason of not wanting more government oversight, there's no inherent reason why, if you don't have to pay a Port Angeles business fee, that you don't register. A lot of the stuff is basically automated on the DOR's website. I don't even have to request a reseller's permit whenever I re-up my stuff. They just give it to me because I'm tagged as a retail store. So a lot of that stuff, it just happens. You don't really have to do anything other than hit print and put it somewhere in your store. I would tentatively suggest, personally, I don't think having 4 layers of math makes it all that complicated. Most businesses, I feel, are fairly well aware of whether they make less than 100,000 or over $1 million, just off the top of their head. But for simplicity's sake, I would almost recommend splitting the difference and going with the 190 as a flat fee for the 25,000 and above businesses. That ends up covering, I would suspect, I don't have the numbers. That's why I've really been running business licenses. I suspect the majority of businesses operating within Port Angeles are in the 100,000 to 1 million range. So if we did a graduated number amount, the vast majority of businesses would be at 190. I suspect most of our smaller businesses would be less than 25,000. I am willing to place money that the number of businesses that would be caught between 25,000 and 100,000, while that would be unfortunate for them, would probably be a statistical anomaly and a very small percentage. I don't think it would be a lot of them. Likewise, I suspect that the number of businesses grossing over 1 million in Port Angeles would be almost as small as the number of businesses doing, or smaller than the number of businesses doing 25,000 to 100,000. So I suspect the vast majority of businesses in town would be at that 190 rate. If we are looking for a balance between simplicity and a flat fee and trying to make sure we're able to provide the services that we want to, I would like more resource officers in town. I would like more code enforcement in town. I miss having a staff member being able to attend PABA, the chamber, there's so many groups, I actually can't name all of them off the top of my head, and I feel ashamed for that. But having that part-time staff member who is dedicated to doing that sort of stuff would be a great resource, both for the business community as a whole, in my opinion, but then also for us on council. So it's easier for us to have a direct communication. And that's why I'm hesitant to make it a $95 flat fee across the board, because I think we're going to lose out on those resources that even just I, as a business owner, would like to see. Additional code enforcement. Another one that I haven't seen directly mentioned, but having additional help for working through the planning department on getting their permits. I know we've been working on that. I know the city is sometimes backlogged on that, but additional resources available for things of that nature for the licensing and whatnot, I think would be very beneficial. So I don't want to see any money raised or gathered through this used on basically non-business oriented functions. But to do that, I am proud that the local businesses have been able to generously give for a downtown resource officer. Now I think it's time for us to not have to directly do that. And instead the city, through taxing all of us equally, is able to just handle that for us. So I've said a ton. Let me summarize real fast what my thought process is right now. I would support the idea of 0 to 25,000 to have no fees. I do not support them not having a license, but I do support them not having a fee. And I am right now recommending splitting the difference between the 2 points of view and actually doing a flat 190. I like even numbers. I'm not sure why it has to be 20 cents. If it doesn't have to be 20 cents, let's just do 190 for all other businesses in the city of Port Angeles, grossing more than $25,001 more, equal to whatever the correct wording is for 25,000 or more gross.
Thank you, Drew. Yeah.
Can I just make sure we're tracking?
Yes.
So that would be, the suggestion would be 0 to $25,000 a license, but 0 fee, and $25,000 in one, a license, and $190.
That is my current suggestion, yes.
We're just tracking it up here.
All right.
And if I could, may I just check in to make sure we capture Councilmember Meyer's suggestion?
He's about to make a motion,
Okay.
so I think we'll get.
Yeah, I was just gonna make a
I think
comment and
he is.
most, but go ahead. I sort of like Drew's idea better. I'm gonna be honest with you. But when it comes to the downtown resource officer, I believe there's another road when we're coming to trying to get funding for that. The Column Transit, they had just hired a security officer to go down there for about $78,000 a year. They're contributing $50,000 a year currently to that downtown resource officer. So I think there might be a deal to be struck there, perhaps. And that's not, whatever this may. But I'm just saying there's a lot, when it comes to downtown resource officers, there may be another path. So, I mean, we could maybe use this money for one of the other cool things like business district's neighborhood advocate or something like that, which would be great. But I am going to make a motion though. I move to make the adjustments as Drew suggested, the 25,000, 0 to $25,000 and then $25,000 and $1 to $100,000 and the flat fee of $190 for a business license of those for the other.
Are you moving that we adopt the ordinance and waive the second reading?
Yes.
Okay. And just a clarification, what Drew said is 25,000, 0 to 25,000 is, and nonprofits is no dollars. $25,000, $1 to $1 million is a flat rate of 190.
Sorry, that was poor phrasing my point. Basically, everyone over the 25,000 would have the flat fee.
Mayor, just so we can make sure we're tracking up here. So waive the second reading, pass the ordinance using the graduated approach, $0 in annual gross revenue in Port Angeles, between $0 and $25,000, a 0 fee, but a business license. And that would apply to nonprofit organizations as well. And then $25,000 and one and above with no cap annual business gross revenue in Port Angeles, $190 even.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Is
Sorry.
there a
Thank
second?
you. Your wording was great, Drew.
It's late. I've been up since 4:30. I will second it, by the way.
Thank you. Otherwise, it's gonna die and we still be here. Okay. Any additional discussion on the motion? Drew, are you gonna be brief?
I will be very brief. The only briefness that I want is to make sure that when we pass this, I would like to make sure that we make an amendment to the motion that includes our priorities for what to do with those funding. I recognize that we don't have the funding yet, but I want to keep my promise that the purpose of this is to provide additional resources for the businesses in town.
Then you just need to say, I move to amend the main motion.
Let me find that list real fast and I shall do that in just a second. If anyone else has other comments.
Page 20 of the packet here.
I would like to amend the main motion to include, what's the correct phrasing? A priority list for funds raised in the order of downtown resource officer, code enforcement, small business support, CFP priorities such as roads, sewers, parks, and JPSF, homelessness support, and affordable housing. For anyone paying attention, I did flip-flop one of those.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Calvin, do you want to ask your question?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. All right, so there's a motion to amend the main motion to just add the council direction for the priority areas for investment with the list, using the list that's on page 28 of the slide deck.
And Mayor, that was my question. Did we intend the information on slide 20? Or, sorry. Because there's a list, which is your summary from your work session.
The motion is made from page 28 of the slide deck, council direction 7, under community investments with new license fee revenues. Does council have policy areas to suggest for investments? ? So the motion is to prioritize in this order: downtown resource officer, code enforcement, small business support, CFP priorities such as roads, sewers, parks, and joint public safety, and homelessness support, and affordable housing.
If I may, Mayor.
Yes.
Because there's also a list on page 31.
Okay.
And it was a little bit more refined. The staff thought was that some of those CFP items would be very difficult to ever pay for a road or a sewer project with business license revenue. So there is a little bit of a tighter list on page on slide 31. Again, happy to follow the direction of the council, but just wanted to point out that nuance.
Okay. Do you want to withdraw your motion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I have no issue withdrawing my amendment if we can do that. Otherwise, I would call a vote.
You can withdraw your amendment if you want.
I will withdraw my amendment and I will make an amendment that we use the priority list as presented by staff on slide 31 of tonight's presentation as our priority list.
All right. You second that, Latricia? Okay. Comments, questions on the priority list? Navarra, go ahead.
Yes, I will support this amendment because I think it makes the main motion better, but just so you know, I'm not supporting the main motion.
All right. Any further discussion on the proposed amendment? Okay, so we have a motion to amend the main motion to include in the main motion direction for staff about prioritizing the spending. I'm botching the language here. On page 31, on slide 31 of the slide deck presented this evening, titled Community Investments Phase 1, Phase 2. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. So we now have an amended main motion that includes direction for staff on funding, where to put the funding. And now we have a main motion that has been amended. Is there further discussion on the main motion? Amy, go ahead.
Thank you. With the changes proposed, I wonder if staff could talk about what does that mean?
Thank you, council member. As Councilmember Schwab mentioned, it is kind of a bell curve as far as the size of businesses. I think the council member is correct. The majority of businesses are within that spot. There are few $1 million plus revenue businesses. So doing some quick math, we are optimistic that the reformatted proposal of $0 to $25,000, zero but a license, and $25,001 and over for all businesses, $190 plus a license. That we are likely to be able to do the phase one items. And I think the beauty of the way the motion's been approved thus far, slide 31 gives us kind of a little bit of a wait and see on phase two. So we would see how those revenues and how it lines up once we find out if it's 5,000 or 4,000 or 6,000 businesses, and then would come back to you probably in the middle or late of next year on when we're ready to proceed with phase two and the timing. So at this point, I think generally we think this is doable.
Thank you. Thank you. Other council discussion? Okay. I guess, so I will support the motion. I have some concerns that for the smaller revenues, that's going to be a lot. Smaller revenue. But I am also confident that we have a really engaged business community that will let us know if it's a problem and come back to us, and we can tweak it if we need to. I mean, I don't want to spend every meeting tweaking things, but that's why we changed the fee schedule to be the way it is so that it is easier to amend. And so I guess the one other thing I would kind of like to see, but I think maybe it falls in maybe it ends up being okay anyway, was something that Mark mentioned about new businesses having to pay, but I guess a new business doesn't have any revenue yet. So there's no fee up front because there isn't any revenue. And that may be one that I'd like to particularly flag to watch if we somehow end up in a thing where someone knows they're not, I don't know. I just want to be mindful of that proposed concern. All right. Any further comments or questions? Okay, I know we don't have a majority, so all those in favor?
Mayor,
yes.
we need to read the ordinance.
Oh yeah, I do. Thank you.
Sorry.
Sorry, it's been a long week already. Just a moment. And I flagged it. I think I skipped flagging it. It was part of my issue. Apologies, everyone, for my. Yep. It's page F9 on mine. Okay. An ordinance of the city of Port Angeles, Washington, amending Title V of the Port Angeles Municipal Code and amending the master fee schedule. Thank you. So we have a motion to approve the ordinance. See if I can get this right. Just a minute. Go back to my document here. We have a motion to approve the ordinance and the master fee schedule with the following changes. Businesses from 0 to 25,000 and nonprofits, an annual business license fee of $0. Businesses with gross revenue of $25,001 to over $1 million, $25,001 and up, a flat annual license fee of $190. And the inclusion for staff understanding of the priorities listed on page 31 in the slide deck from tonight's presentation. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right, the motion passes.
Madam Mayor, can I just have 1 minute of personal privilege?
I mean, it doesn't really work that way, but
Okay.
you're welcome to make a comment if you want. And then
No, I just want to apologize for staff if they were offended of my Orwellian comment. I don't think it's staff that would make things Orwellian. It's elected officials that direct staff to make things Orwellian. So no offense to the staff.
All right, thank you. We do have another public hearing, but I'm going to suggest we take a break. That took a bit of time. And we'll come back and do the public hearing for property tax. And so we're going to take a 5-minute break and we'll be back in just a minute. We'll be back in 5 minutes. All right. Thank you all. We will move on to the next public hearing. And that is on your agenda, item F1, because I rearranged things a little bit. And so we will have a discussion on the ordinance levying 2024 property tax collection. And I will be sure to read the ordinance before we move on tonight. Serena, go ahead. I'm assuming you have a presentation for us.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. I do have a presentation that I think is just coming up here, so we'll just give it a moment, just discussing and kind of highlighting, going over some of the limitations for levying property tax, and that's for collection in our 2025 year. Next slide, please. So as we're looking at our property tax limitations, state law allows us to take 1% of the full fair market value as our increase each year. So essentially it's $10 per every $1,000 of assessed value. So of that, and again, that's our full fair market value as assessed by the assessor's office. Our levy rates also have some limitations on them. So the state, within that $10 range, the state has $3.60. Local districts, which is where the city falls, is $5.90. And then other districts have about 50 cents within that $10 levy limit. There's also an order in which those local districts are processed when we're looking at those levies. So starting with senior taxing districts, that includes cities, it includes the county's regular levies, as well as county road districts, public utility districts, and port districts. Next slide, please. So as we look at the City of Port Angeles levy limit in particular, for the 2024 year, we have a $3.53 limit in total. Of that, about $3.31 is our regular limit. And we also have 22.5 cents that we can take for our fireman's pension because we do have that pension fund. We are eligible to receive that. So that's where we get our $3.53 in total for our available amount for the capacity that we have for levying. In 2024, the levy rate was $1.63. And again, that's for every $1,000 of assessed valuation, which left an available capacity of about $1.90. And so again, that's if we were to seek any kind of levy lid lift, that's the amount that we would have available to us as we're considering that. For 2025, we have an estimated levy rate of $1.61 with an available capacity of about $1.92. Next slide, please. So this next slide shows that $10 limitation. So again, $10 for every $1,000 of assessed valuation. This is our 2024 collection because we are all still going, all these jurisdictions are going through the same process that we are in setting those levies. So we do not yet know what those are. They have not been certified. So when looking at 2024, we have about $8.59 in total collection inside the city limits for the property tax levies. Within that, again, the City of Port Angeles has that $1.63. School districts, about $2.81. Looking at the state, $2.32. Those are the largest portions. Clallam County taking about 77 cents. Next slide, please. And so as we're looking at our levy for the next year, our state law does allow for a property tax increase of either 1% or the amount of the implicit price deflator or the IPD, and it's the lower of the two. And so the IPD is published by the Bureau of Economic Analysis and is used, one of the factors used to determine inflation in the economy. Next slide, please. In years when the IPD does fall below 1%, it would be necessary for City Council to declare a substantial need through a resolution in order to levy that increase of the full allowable 1% that's allowed by state law. Currently in our city financial policies, the 1% increase is directed. And next slide, please. As we look at the implicit price deflator for the 2024 year, so we take September of each year and whatever the IPD comes back as is what sets our amounts for our property tax levy. So in 2024, that percent is 2.57, meaning that there is no second resolution that we required for substantial need. And we've just kind of showed a historical comparison here on this slide so that you can see that there are some years where we have fallen below that 1%. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And in those years, we would have that second resolution that is required. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at that full 1% increase for our property tax levy, the total amount above what is collected in 2024 that we would expect in 2025 is about $51,074. Additionally, we are allowed to also take amounts for new construction. So the assessed value for new construction is about $14.8 million. Of that amount that we can levy and take in addition is the $24,174. That is based on this year's levy amount. So it's to reflect the new construction that's occurred that wasn't included in the levy that we sent to the auditor's office last year. It's not tied to the 1%. It's allowed as a one-time amount that we can add on to our levy. Additionally, there are a few other items that are allowed, including state properties assessed values, refunds, and improvements. And in 2025, the city is anticipating that those refund amounts will be about $12,000. Next slide, please. And so in 2025, the slide might look a little bit familiar. It's in the budget document. It was also something that was presented as part of our revenue sources presentation for the 2025 budget. In 2025, we are expecting about $5.2 million in total collection from property tax. It is the largest single source of revenue within the general fund. And so it's an important process each year. Next slide, please. And so just taking a look at our assessed valuations for history, you can see that year over year, those valuations have gone up. We're expecting about a 3% increase as compared to the 2024 year. And it is important to note that these assessed values do reflect estimated amounts by the county until those are certified. So those have not yet been certified. And so we've included amounts that were provided at a point in time, and they might be subject to changing slightly. Next slide, please. And so as we're looking at that 1% maximum allowable, when we take our assessed values, if those values increase, our levy rate will go down. If they decrease in total, the levy rate will go up. And that's just to maintain that 1%, because the 1% increase is as a whole. It is not based on individual property amounts. So the entire levy amount cannot increase more than 1% each year. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows some comparables on those yearly costs to homeowners. So we've demonstrated here a $250,000, $300,000, and $350,000 home, and roughly what the estimated tax collection for each year was for each of those years. So we have 23, 24, and 25. And just looking at the slide, it does only include the city of Port Angeles' portion of property tax only. So it's not, that entire $8.59 that was demonstrated in that in a previous slide. It does just show what the city would be collecting. And so you can see that because we're adjusting our levy rate, if a home's value was to stay exactly the same, so if we were to take the $300,000 valuation, if that were to stay exactly the same, the levy would actually go down because assessed valuations as a whole are going up. So if your home assessed value stays the same, you would pay less on your total property tax. However, more likely would be that you would have a different percentage assigned for the assessed value of your home. So next slide, please. So we have tried to demonstrate this as an average. So we're taking that $300,000 home that was valued at $300,000 in 2024, and we're applying the average increase for those assessed valuations of 3%, which means that home would be worth about $309,000 in 2025. And so the easiest way to calculate what you would pay on that next year's property tax is to take that assessed value for every $1,000. So if we divide the $309,000 by 1,000, we get 309. If we multiply it by our estimated levy rate of $1.61, we get $497.49. And so you may recall that on the previous slide in 2024, the total collection was $489, which means in 2025, based on those average assessed value increases, the total dollar amount of an increase for that home would be about $8.49. And again, that's for the entire year. Next slide, please. So just wrapping up, the increase to the property tax is one of only 2 items where we're seeing rate increases within our 2025 budget. So that 1% increase to property tax is the maximum allowable. And we are seeing that costs are increasing at a higher rate than 1% in all funds, including general funds. The second item where we have estimated rate increases in 2025 include those utility rates that were approved last month for the water and wastewater utilities. And those were based on the 2025 to 2026 cost of service analysis. Next slide, please. And so finally, just in wrapping up, we're looking at our budget schedule. So for our November 19th meeting, we are anticipating the continuation of the public hearing for property tax, as well as the adoption of the ordinance and resolution authorizing the property tax levy. We'll have our 2025 budget presentation, including the public hearing and the first reading of the ordinance adopting that budget. And then on December 3rd, we are continuing that public hearing for the 2025 budget and conducting that second reading of the ordinance with anticipated adoption of the budget at that time. Next slide, please. And so council, tonight we are requesting that you conduct the first reading of the 2024 property tax levy for 2025 collection ordinance, that you open the public hearing, continue the public hearing to the November 19th meeting, and then the time would be yours for questions or discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Serena. All right, I will go ahead and read the ordinance and then open the public hearing. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, levying regular ad valorem property taxes for collection in the fiscal year 2025 and directing the city clerk to certify said amount to the Board of Clallam County Commissioners. All right, I will open the public hearing. If there's anyone in council chambers or online who would like to speak to property taxes, now is the time to do so. I don't see any hands online. And all right. No one in council chambers and no one online. So I will continue the public hearing and open it up for council questions. So that's okay. Brendan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So much of our revenue is based on property tax collection, and I'm not saying that there's a bubble, right, in the housing market, and but do we have like a plan, like sort of like a CEMP of like what happens if a housing bubble does burst? So like the values of homes, fall 40% or something. That seems like it would be a considerable decrease in property tax collections because of the assessed value would depreciate. So I didn't know if there was a plan that I just wasn't aware of.
Yeah, so the way the property tax levy works, it's designed to kind of work in conjunction with the assessed valuations. So if the assessed value goes up, the levy rate goes down. And kind of just to speak to what you're mentioning, if the assessed valuation in total goes down, that levy rate would go up to maintain the total collection plus the 1% allowable.
Okay, so that would be really bad for people, but we wouldn't lose money.
Correct.
Cool. This would be my 5th year not supporting this, and I won't support it.
All right. Any other comments or questions from council? Okay, I don't hear any. So we will have this, we will pick this up again at our next meeting in November. Before we move on, Carrie, can you confirm that the motion that I made for the business licenses included the language to waive the second reading? I was just sitting here. I was listening to the presentation, but also thinking, I think I said that, but I just want to make sure because we can add that in if I need to.
Second time.
Mayor, on the first time that the motion was read, you did.
Okay, but not when we voted.
But not when it was confirmed.
Okay.
So,
but I did.
It is
say
my understanding that
that is the motion.
Council's intention.
Okay, thank you. So I was half right to ask the question. All right, then now, sorry, let me get back to where we are here. We have accomplished all of F, and I will go back to late items. And are there any late items from staff?
Mayor, no late items from staff this evening.
Okay, thank you. I have one late item, kind of. I'm just gonna say it now, and see if we have consensus. I would like to suggest that, we move item I1, 2025 legislative priorities to the November 19th meeting. Does anyone have issues with that? Okay, I don't hear anyone protesting. So, we will move, item I1 to the second meeting of November.
Madam Mayor, you
Yes.
had already asked that earlier.
Okay, I did, sorry.
Yes.
It's been a long day. Yeah, just confirm all kinds of things I'm confirming tonight. All right, then let's move on to consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to add to the consent agenda? Oh, Drew, sorry.
You said add first this time and it threw me off. I'd like to add I2, city-owned property plan. J1, amendment number 2 to services agreement SVC-2022-46. And J2, IT software license annual adjustment and 3-year agreement to the consent agenda.
Any
Second.
opposition? No need to second. I'm
No need to second.
just, he's asking, Nathan wants to make a comment on anyway, is there any issues adding those things?
I was gonna say, I don't have an issue adding it, but I heard that there was.
Yes,
public
I'm
that
in
was
the,
interested in I2. So maybe you want to keep that separate and not add it.
yeah, I think it was mostly just the comment wanted to be made to it, but Nathan, you wanted to. So do you are you okay adding it? If you aren't, then we'll leave it separate. It has to be everybody. With consensus.
Well, I think we should leave it separate.
Okay. All right. Then we will add, is there any opposition to J1 and 2? No. Okay. All right. I will read anything anyone wants to pull from the consent agenda? No. Okay. I will read the consent agenda then. We have the city council minutes of September 17th, October 3rd, October 15th, and October 22nd, 2024. Expenditure report from October 5th, 2024, and October 20 through October 25th, 2024, in the amount of $5,847,314.42. Material purchase diamond dust, material purchase electric pad mount switch, intra-agency agreement between Washington Traffic Safety Commission and the City of Port Angeles, memorandum of understanding between REAL Program and the City of Port Angeles, CON-2024-04 Marine Drive Pavement Final Acceptance, MEC-2024-30 Wastewater Treatment Plant Screen Wash and Press Parts, equipment purchase, equipment services, mobile column lift system, 2024 Lodging Tax Advisory Committee Budget Amendment Recommendation, CON-2024-02 Electric Conduit Boring Final Acceptance, PSA 2024-45 16th Street Low Impact Development Retrofit Project TR0715, PSA 2019-38 Structural Engineering Services Amendment Number 4, MEC 2024-2027 Reservoir Instrument Chlorine Analyzer, Amendment Number 2 to Services Agreement SVC 2022-46, IT Software Licensing Annual Adjustment and 3-year Agreement. Any comments, questions, or motion to approve?
I move to approve.
I'll second that motion, Drew.
Right. Any comments or questions? All right. Anyone opposed to approving the consent agenda as read, please state your opposition. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Let's go to item I2. Nathan.
So Mayor and Council, at your January 16th meeting, Council passed a motion directing staff to develop a plan and timeline to do a cost-benefit analysis of city-owned property in which the city is a landlord or properties where the city is a tenant. City staff have drafted such a plan. We've built that in 4 phases. looking at different elements of some of those properties in which we are a landlord or tenant. The first phase has our simpler leases that are less of a research project. Some of the further phases, including phase 2 and phase 3, many of those are more complicated scenarios where we have more detailed research that we'll need to dig into relative to some of those leases and relationships, and we'll be reporting back to council on all of those items. I do want to note for the record that we did leave out inadvertently a lease relative to Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife on the Elwha River that we currently lease to them, and we would suggest that that also be added to phase 3 of the plan. We do have a detailed schedule laid out for the deliveries of each of those phases, and each phase will include background history, copies of leases, maps, and spreadsheets associated with those properties, and ultimately look forward to doing more of a detailed cost-benefit analysis on the entirety of these subject properties. So council, that's what we have for you this evening, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, are there any questions from council? Go ahead, Latricia.
Well, I just want to thank staff for doing this research and bringing it back to us. As I chatted with Nathan earlier, that I think one of the things that this process has allowed staff to indirectly realize through this process is that the reason why it was complicated because there were so many different departments managing a lease or a tenant agreement. And I think it's helped us to, as a city, to better figure out how to better manage these in the future and stuff. And so maybe there's leases and agreements like this are housed under one department instead of having to go to all different departments to manage it. So for example, you'd have a real estate specialist in the house that would manage all of these type of agreements. So I think it's been a great task, and I appreciate you guys going through and researching all of that. Thank you.
Drew, go ahead.
Just a quick observation. Because of how we originally worded the motion back in January for specifically property that the city either is the landlord or a tenant is the reason why there aren't any vacant lots or undeveloped properties on this list. So at a later time, if we as a council would like staff to do some sort of work or inventory on that as well, we would have to add that in. That's all.
Thank you. I was noting that as well. Anyone else? Amy, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I'm really looking forward to the spreadsheets. It's just eager for that. Thanks.
All right. Is there a motion? The recommendation is to direct staff to proceed with the city-owned property plan as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right. Any further council discussion? All right, so we have a motion to direct staff to proceed with the city-owned property plan as presented. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to council reports, unless I'm missing something, but I think I've got everything. All right, let's start with Navarra.
Well, I don't have any real report, but I thought I would just say that I'm visiting some friends in Seattle this week, and we went on a walk today. And we walked past Lakeside Industries, and I thought, that name sounds familiar. And sure enough, they're in our packet today, and they're one of the people we contract with, and it was actually very fun to see one of the sort of more industrial sites that is regularly some folks we do business with. So while not anything really related to council, it was a very fun full circle moment to be able to, you know, have the happenstance of seeing them on my walk today.
Excellent. Thank you. Brendan.
Just a short little thing. One of the interesting things at the last Clown Transit meeting was that we passed a contract with a private security agency to do the downtown resource area at the transit center, I guess, for $78,000, which I thought, and I suggested it. Can we work with the city? And like, would be really great to have maybe more hours with a commissioned officer that is, you know, obligated to the Constitution and, you know, all the good things about our country. So it would be great if we could work out a deal with the city and not to have a private thing there, but you know, that's staff and the other staff's job to work together. That's it. It's not a huge report.
Thank you. Amy, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm on the homelessness task force. We did not have a meeting since last meeting, but I'm on a couple of subcommittees which did meet. So I'm on a subcommittee to help the county complete a 5-year homelessness plan. We're really just getting into the meat of things. The city of Port Angeles did submit their comp plan, city of Sequim did, and Forks did as well. And so it's really going to be pretty well-rounded. And there's a lot of work going into that. And we're working very closely with the Housing Solutions Committee. And we're hoping that this 5-year plan actually helps to inform their work as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And there'll be more to come on that. Another subcommittee that I'm on for the homelessness task force is actually identifying the funding priorities. And we haven't brought all that back to the full task force yet, but I wanted to mention out loud that will happen December 3rd. And there's some neat discussion happening about homelessness prevention and how we can support our local landlords so that we can partner better with housing vouchers or other subsidies so that our landlords are not feeling like they're taking a huge risk in doing that. So it's really interesting conversation. I wanted to say that out loud in case anybody was interested in that topic, December 3rd in the commissioner's office. Thanks.
Thank you. Drew.
So we did have a couple meetings for the boards, committees, commission, subcommittee working on the proposed code changes, which should be coming to the full council soon. This month, early next month. And then I've got an in-person meeting for the Olympic Peninsula Tourism Commission tomorrow. That's going to be out at Seven Cedars. Quarterly, they kind of move them around where they're at. We were in Sequim a couple months ago. The PA comp plan stakeholders meeting is going to be this Friday at 9. And then at 2, there is a North Olympic Peninsula Recompete Committee Coalition meeting to kind of get an update of where we're at as far as that all goes. And then lastly, something of interest that also pertains to, I guess, our local economy. I was in Victoria recently over the weekend for my birthday and unfortunately got stuck in Canada. The weather was so bad and blowing so hard on Monday, the Coho had to cancel its trip. That is only the 4th time it has ever done that. So, oh no, I had to spend one more day in Victoria.
All right, Latricia.
I had some MRC subcommittee meetings since our last meeting, and I did some individual advocacy for continuing to protect the Elwell watershed to our Washington State Board of Natural Resources. So continuing to put pressure on them to do the right thing for our community.
All right, thank you. We also, just for council's information, sent a letter on Monday in advance of Board of Natural Resources to Commissioner Franz, and then additionally to some members of the Board of Natural Resources in advance of their meeting on Tuesday. And the outcome of that meeting is that 3 of the parcels, Alley Cat, Treewell, and Parched, that are on the Elwha watershed were on the docket, and at the request of the Lower Elwha Clallam tribe, Alley Cat was pulled from the list, and the other 2 moved forward. Additionally, last week, I think I might have mentioned this at the last meeting, I spoke on 2 panels at a conference in Victoria on reimagining community safety and well-being. It was fascinating. It was a great place to go to a conference, certainly, but I was invited by Victoria Mayor Alto, and enjoyed being able to represent us there and talk about the good things that we're doing around some of our community safety and well-being, and of course, knowing that we have work to do and hearing what other communities are facing and what they're doing about it as well. So that was a good use of my time. And lastly, I just want to say that obviously yesterday was a big day in our country, and I think my hope is that locally we will continue to see people working together to improve our community and move forward. Obviously, there's at least, it would seem, based on my assessment of the people that I know, some pretty fractured relationships. And I hope that as a community, we will continue to move forward together. And I will then turn it over now to City Manager.
Mayor and Council, I want to first apologize for the technical difficulties this evening. Sorry about that, and sorry about that to those members of the public that were trying to attend. I know that was not ideal for the start of the meeting, but really grateful that we were able to get going, and big thank you to IT staff for being here and helping out with that. I also had a Housing Solutions Committee meeting where we talked about similar topics to what Councilmember Miller shared, including support for landlords that are struggling to be able to fund some of the repairs that they're having to make for their housing, as well as comp plan related updates that we are cooperating with Clallam County on, that are very meaningful to housing as well as land use inventory. So Council, that's all I have for you this evening, and thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to our second public comment period. So if you are here and wish to make a public comment, please go ahead and head down. And if you are online and wish to make a public comment, please raise your virtual hand. And we'll start in council chambers. And go ahead, John, when you're ready.
Hey, nice to be here. Going to comment on 2 things. One, was paying or doing some business at the city the other day, and acquaintance of mine was paying for their utility bill. I was over at the planning table, and the guy knew that I owned a couple pieces of property that were behind Peninsula Behavioral Health that I had sold to Peninsula Behavioral Health. The guy asked me what I was going to do with the property. And I says, well, I've sold it. He says, well, are they going to build there? I says, well, I would assume so at some point in time. He says, that's going to really foul up my parking situation even more in a residential area. So I'm commenting again about paving on 8th Street with bicycle lanes that give a false sense of security to bicyclists. Use 7th or 9th. The comp plan for bicycling, or the map, is at least 20 years old. Second thing, 911 emergency operations. The buildings that they have been at least initially proposing are substantially, in my opinion, way too big and too expensive. Of course, you're paying big fees when they're publicly funded. I would encourage the city to still strongly look at walking away. I didn't say those places weren't needed. I said the cost is too much and that you need to look at other alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any hands online. Let me just double check. I don't see any hands online. So we'll close public comment period. And and adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for being here this evening.